I've got the stool legs laid out how I want them, and so I just kind of want to give you a walkthrough. I put that one on a wedge because it was not at all level, so I was having a hard time reading it. So what I've got going on here is that I've got grain that changes color definitely down the middle, and what looks like the middle on the top was not the middle on the bottom. And so this orientation of this first leg skews a little bit more this way than I would love for it to, but I really don't have an option because the hole is already drilled and it looked perfectly in line with the bottom as opposed to with the top. So you get a little bit of that. And we got a little bit of, not quite bark, but that layer between the bark. And what I went for was some grain that went pretty vertical because that's what you're gonna see head on. And then similar there and there. It's not as striking in the front leg, but it's the one that worked the best out of these as far as what it, you know, when I spoke shaved it. So that's what we've got. And then I'll have a stretcher. I'll first start working on the stretcher between these two legs. And then there'll be one from here in the middle to this guy. So I've got to start thinking about what I want that to look like. Took a moment while it was in place to make sure I hammered this down with my mallet to make sure it was really snug. That way I could give little marks on where it was located. And I also assigned each leg a letter. So there we go. And then my previous stool from the underseat, I did 11 inches down. I just went for it. And that's where I did my joinery for my stretchers. And I want the stool to be a little bit shorter. So I'm gonna go with 10 inches. And so before I had cut like a piece of wood, 11 inches. And I found that I had a hard time always marking out somewhere further away. And so I just had a section of 4x4. So I drew a line 10 inches up on two sides. And I'm going to see how that works as far as laying out, the 10 inches off the bottom of the seat. So I'll videotape that part. When I flip this over, I already found it useful to add similar marks on the underside, because without a doubt, you're going to touch these, move them, and then having to keep rotating the stool right side upside down, and keeping that orientation is just nice to have it on both sides. But I'll put the camera in the cradle, and we'll see how my new marking system works out. The first thing I've done is put a scrap of wood because all of those tenons are super proud. So it is just sitting around that scrap of wood. And here's my little doodad. And it's still going to be tricky, so I gotta come up with more ideas. So I'll report back in a second. Alright, so I just grabbed a little piece of scrap out of my scrap bin and clamped it on. It's not perfect because this handle is pretty in the way. But it's out of the way enough that I can snug this up over here. And I can easily draw a line there. And I can give myself like 3 points of contact. To help me get in a sense of where this should go, and I can even in a moment extend this out further, but it's pretty bulky, so I don't want to do that yet. It'll be fun to see what creative ways you all figure out how to solve this exact same problem. I'm going to carefully try to extend this. So I'm extending this a lot further, but now I have to hold this corner very snugly on the seat blank. And that's going to give me a little bit more of a line that wraps around. I don't know that this is necessary. This is just where my line of thought is going at the moment. I think just the one tick is actually enough on that. I just have some generic string. I know it's definitely longer than what I need it to be. May not have any experience doing a clove hitch. That's what I'm going to use. So it's like this, and I turn my hand like I'm starting a car. So when you put the key in, I'm just exaggerating that motion a lot more. So I'm going to turn my hand as much around in the rotation clockwise as I can. And then I'm going to do that a second time. I'm going to put that over the leg. And I don't think I cut enough string actually. So I mean, I could make that work, but why fight with it? So I'm going to do a clove hitch. Starting the car would be this. So I'm exaggerating that. Boom. And then go further down. Boom. And then this one slides behind. And then I'm going to go right over the legs. I know that I want this between my B and C because A is my very front leg. I'm going to snug that up just a little bit. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Do-do. Do-do. Get that over there. And then you get the work of getting some of that slack out. So you just got to trace it back. And now I'm just making sure it's centered on that line, and overall just getting to like what I did is more or less what I'm trying to do right now. Gives you a chance to imagine where that stretcher's at. You can of course turn the chair or the stool the other direction if your legs are still in there tight. Get a chance to look over it, review it. I'm happy with that. So next what I'm going to think about doing is I'm going to get a drill brad point, and I'm going to get one that has a nice big point, and I'm going to figure out, or I can use the awl on my marking or my combo square, and I'm going to poke where that's at so I know where my starting spot is going to be. And I'm looking to go for dead center. So obviously the string, I probably could have done this a little bit better. I've put it all on the same side, but it's helping me enough that I know what's going on. I'm just gonna review that I've got the string truly centered on all of those lines that I just gave myself. So that's right there. I don't want to lose track of those little lines or that little hole that I just made. So I'm going to circle it. And now I'm going to stop the camera, get set up for drilling. So I've got my string back in place and I went ahead and put it on the same side. And I was just trying to think about, so I've got those inside of these two legs figured out, but I thought that it'd make much more sense to kind of put these two in line with each other and think about what it would mean to hit that like dead on. So I went ahead and thought about where the middle of this was at, in line with the back of this, in there, and through the back of there. So I just barely dropped this. You can see some of my lines there. So I just gave myself a little starter hole, and I'm going to keep the string more or less in place while I drill, and so that I can try hitting that mark. And I'm going to go with an undersized drill bit to start with. Right now I have on order a much longer bit, but my only long bit right now is 1/8 of an inch, and I was recommending 1/4 of an inch as your pilot hole. So feel free to improvise with what you've got. So I'll do the pilot hole with this guy, and then we'll jump up to the 1/4 of an inch pilot hole so I can get my tapered reamer in the hole. Okay, so I got my smallest drill bit here, and I know that if I use my 1/8 of an inch bit right out of the gate, it's gonna have a hard time because this is on a round surface. So the smaller the bit, the less it wants to kind of roll off of wherever you're aiming for it to go. So I could have also just used an awl and really punched a bigger hole. But for me, I'm just gonna get this little baby in here. Just give me enough of a start there. But then I can come here. And again, I am now starting to think about making this a continuous line to hit this little baby circle back here. So I'm trying to have a long view of what's happening. If having the string around here makes you nervous, you can of course remove it or just pop it down. And then I am really holding on to this so that I can apply pressure here. Now that I've got it in, I'm really starting to focus even more on that nice straight line. Just ejecting chips as I could feel that it wasn't wanting to go in anymore. Made it through this guy. Well, I've still got this drill bit in here. I'm going to give myself a little starting. All of a sudden I can see that I don't have enough room for my drill, so I'm going to choke up on this bit. Let's see if I've got enough room now. Thankfully I do. This is just a way of doing it, so feel free to think about, is this how it makes sense for you to do it in your shop? Luckily, I just made it through, and I'm at the max here. Ta-da! So out I come. A heads up that there's going to be hot chips. I know that I can actually go up in size of pilot hole, so now I've got a nice brad point bit. And I want to hit this nice brad point bit on the outside of my legs, because that's what's gonna not get the reamer nearly to the extent. And so I just want to prevent as much tear out as possible. A little rough there. It's gonna be okay. Let's get these legs back in place. Sweet. Next, I get to start focusing on getting the reamer in there. Time to look at your stretcher pieces and think about what you want to do with them. I really like this one. This one's nice and straight, and so I am going to use this back here. This one's got some variation in the diameter, and then also has a bit of a dog out right here. So I'm going to use this as my next one. And you can also start to think about, do I want to use the full ends or whatnot? I think that, yeah, I'll go ahead and taper this end, and then I'll know that I get to cut this end back where this starts to thicken back up in diameter. So that's what I'm going to aim for. I'm going to go over, use the tenon cutter, thing exactly what you already know happens with this guy, so no different. Said that for the stretchers it was no different, but it's a little different, meaning that this is the 5/8 one, I have a 1/2 and 3/8, and I tend to find that working my way down is pretty nice. So you'll kind of see me do that. I'm shifting down from a 5/8 to a 1/2 inch tapered tenon cutter. Time to shift down to the 3/8 tapered tenon cutter. If I keep doing this, I am going to figure out a better way to maybe hold this with, I've seen it almost with spoke shave handles on it. I wonder if that would be easier than rotating the leg through this. Find that using my chest to apply inward pressure, that way my hands just have to focus on rotating. Alright, I am finally a good bit proud, so I might have even gone an 1/8 of an inch proud there. I'm going to give it a gentler swipe there at the end. Nice. Got the stool ready to go. Okay, I've got the small reamer in, and I just barely fit in here, which is quite convenient for me. I'm gonna bring this a little closer to my body so that my stomach can help support. And I can mentally be like, okay, the back of the drill is in line with that other hole. Doesn't eject chips very well, so heads up on that. When it stops cutting, it's crammed with chips. So I figure out my angle, and then I like to pull back just a little bit, get the drill going, and then make forward contact. I don't have any mark lines on here, so it's going to be a lot of testing. Put that back in place with what I'm seeing above with my little witness marks. Get the drill line back up. I got a dead battery. Line myself all back up, making sure the legs hadn't rotated or anything like that. Careful, chips from the tapered reamer can be extremely hot. Do be careful though, this can get pretty warm if it's been working. So far what's on the back really has not changed, so I'm just getting anxious and testing a lot and early. that's it. Lovely. For how uneven my stool is, I do wonder if I should have done this still an inch higher. We'll see. I don't know how much I'm gonna have to take off. And one of my priorities with the height is that we run our Roomba robot vacuum quite a bit. So making sure that that robot doesn't get stuck underneath our furniture is kind of important to me. Let's see if that's all within angle within the camera. So again, I've got my little witness marks up here, making sure everything's happy. And I am putting a lot of force on this hand, so just make sure that this hand is not anywhere near the exterior of that hole. So I'm in line here, back of my drill's in line. Having a little bit harder time keeping everything in line based on the battery. So I'm gonna try changing to my other small battery, if I can find that. All right, those fit. So now I need to work on getting this to the right length. So I'm gonna overshoot this and let myself cut it off. Just gotta trust that I can straighten this out better than it is once I have a smaller piece in there. But roughly, let's go with there. Let's always go a little bit long. And so I'll just take this over to my chop saw and then I'll taper. You've seen that, so I'm not gonna bore you. Here's a moment of checking in on progress. So I technically got it fit in a lot of ways, meaning it's through all of them and these are in. But if you take a closer look, there's a lot of gap here, so this isn't able to go in deep enough. So that means I'm gonna keep turning in the reamer a little bit and come back for another fit. And to get this in, I actually had to assemble this and then bring it down and in. So I will keep doing this little round robin a few times and check back in when it's fitting nice. I'm in the shop right now and I'm actually working on the second stool I'm making in this round. And so I actually have air dryer slab that it's probably been in my backyard air drying for about 3 or 4 years. So I feel good about it. And in fact, I milled this last year and it's just been sitting in my shop. So that's what I'm using for my seat. And when I got milled, it was 5/4. So now it is 1 inch and about 1/4 thickness. So yeah, so I'm happy with that thickness. I would say 5/4, 6/4 in there is sort of what you'd be aiming for, because I just like a little bit of heft and I don't want it to feel fragile when I'm sitting on it. But if you're intentionally doing a smaller size one, 4/4 stock that you can buy at any lumber yard, seems perfectly acceptable. I'm done test fitting the first stretcher and I want to show off what it looks like. I want to be up front that it's not totally gap free everywhere. So the good news is that on the top side you see a little bit of gap right over here, but it's not too bad. And I think that type of gap is there because I probably just had some wobble in my reaming. And then on the underside, I've tried fitting it multiple times, and I think it's just sort of, you know, what it took to get it all the way across, and then again, just what little bit of hand variation there might have been. I'm not bothered by it, but just giving you sort of, as the saying is, chair maker perfect. And well, that does not want to focus more on that little spot there, but and then an important detail to keep in mind that I hadn't covered is that you intentionally want to make sure that this hole is not more than half the diameter of your leg. So you don't want to take away all of its strength by putting a giant, you know, Swiss cheese hole in there. So you want to keep all the strength of that vertical grain. And so that's why we size down. And then I think that it helps to just kind of scale down the stretcher so that things just start to feel proportionate to the joinery that you do. On this side, we obviously can't do the clove hitch in a way that it slips up underneath the leg. And so I'm going to show you here. So we go around and we cross over. Then we come back and we have to go inside that X at the end of our string. So I'm going to pull up a little bit of slack there. Fish that little tail through. And of course I've got to pull out more slack. But that's how we do that. And now I'm going to more or less figure out where the middle of this is and give myself some siding to help me figure out where the hole all the way across should go. So mine came out to be 9 3/4, and a little proud of that. Basically 4 7/8 is what I need to get to. So my marks were obviously 4 7/8 was pretty vague, so I got to go in between those two. But I want to come out the middle here. Alright. So I'm going to let myself drill this hole. And looks like I didn't organize the string over here at all. But that's fine. So that's more or less centered on all my little hashes. So I'm going to also my eyes just don't love how slanty this guy is over to the side, but that's who I've got. I went with what was straight of the grain on the underside. I'll have to show that to you at some point. But I think I'm going to hold off on this until I can actually have the drill bit, because I just need to see it at different angles. And I'm not set up with my drill, so one moment. Alright, so I've got my string off to the side. But I'd already poked my hole and it was right there. Give myself that little pilot. I thought about using a different drill bit, but sticking with the plan. So from here, I'm looking at this long line and I'm imagining hitting right about there. Let's see how we did on the back side. Yeah, that's, you see that well enough? That is plenty centered, so that is excellent. Good, good. Alright, now I gotta get this leg in position. So I'm lining up my witness marks up high. Over and over again, I keep being thankful for those extra witness marks I gave myself. Oh, jeez. Not helping. Just couldn't hold it. My stool does not want to stay together very well. Keeps wanting to lift back, and then I lose my leg. And I want to have enough pressure here to put this there. I made it through. Fingers are big time crossed. That is in the middle of that I would say it's a little off to the side, but that's just gonna complement the stool. So we're gonna go with it. It's where the hole is at. It was fighting me, so no worries. I went a little aggressive there. Note to self, start out a little slower. I think for this next round, it's just too tight in here that I'm gonna actually take my legs out and try reaming that knot inside the stool. And I've yet to make this guy, so I should put this back together. Think about my stretcher. Alright, so I've got either this kind of dog leg here, or I even have one there, so I'm going to start out with just cutting this first one, getting it to fit, and then I have a rough idea of where that second one's going to go, but I don't need to worry about it yet. Good news is that I've got all the stretchers nicely fitted now. I will show off where it doesn't fit as great as I would love for it to. You can probably see that void, and that's just due to wobbling with the tenon reamer, or tapered reamer, because it's nice and snug on the outside, but not too bad. Sure, make her perfect. Just gotta keep reminding yourself of that. So now I've gone through and very nicely labeled all the parts, and then I use my mechanical pencil here and drew a nice line. So next I'm going to just use a handsaw, cut all of these, and I might cut these at that angle that these are at and keep a nice even reveal on them. And that is so that when I use a wedge in there, they all start out kind of at the same point. So yeah, just trying to clean up a little bit, and I am going to take my stretchers, or all my parts that need a slot cut for them, for the wedges, to Pratt, so that I can use the bandsaw there. I want to try that versus a handsaw which I previously used. So yep, that's where I'm at right now. I just have my favorite Japanese saw for cross cutting. I don't know enough about these saws to tell you, oh, this or that. I can try finding a link if people want it to what I actually purchased when I got it. But what I'm going to do is and I might have to relabel those actually, but that's totally fine. Maybe try to give a different angle of what I'm doing, so I'm just trying to line the saw up with the same angle as the whole leg. label these. And then the next thing I'm actually going to really focus on is that for the wedge, so you have the grain of the leg, and you want the wedge to go exactly opposite as the grain is going. So that's what I want, and this is E. G. D. And then I'm also going to give myself a heads up as to how far in this tenon goes. So, or how far I need to do that saw cut. So whatever is the furthest in, or the closest to where I'm cutting. So that would be this cheek right here I'm going to mark. Very lightly because I have to erase this mark later on. And then continue doing that. A little harder to see here, but I'll get it. Alright, so now the grain is going this way, so I need to switch orientations to vertical. This one's going to be F. And I also want to give those nice witness marks like I was previously. So that's going to be my little arrow. I guess this is less important because it's only got so many options, but I think it still makes sense. And I'm doing it on the outside so that when I flush everything up, these little lines disappear, whereas if I had done it on the inside, they will not self-disappear. And what I mean by disappear is during glue up, and then after the glue is dry, I'm going to flush these up, so that's going to go away. Alright, now I've got seat tops to deal with. This is A. And this one did get a little rotated away from its witness mark, but that's fine. And C. And now we have the green. So the green is definitely going this way very strongly. So all of the wedges will go this way. And I'll admit that I've not done enough chair making to be like wedges are a requirement, or because you have so much connection with that tapered tenon and tapered mortise, if you could just use wood glue or not. I just like adding the wedges more for decorative and to develop that skill, as that's something I've wanted to work on. Alright, and then the same thing here. I've given myself a really good plan of how far that slot for the wedge needs to go. And this really light pencil line. And if to prevent having to sand this, I think it's denatured alcohol takes away pencil lines. So my next step is, of course, to cut all the slits or slots for the wedges. And then after that, I will prep all this material. So I've got some tear out around here that I very gently want to sand so that it doesn't rip out more of the grain. Of course, I can use a card scraper or sandpaper to kind of clean up any of this, or you can just leave it more rustic feeling as it is. I will admit that I've got some tear out that I would like to eliminate. So I'm going to try either the card scraper or sandpaper to get rid of that. If I do sandpaper, I honestly will probably use 80, or no, I'll probably use 100 to get rid of this tear out, and then maybe go up to 150 or so. I want to keep a lot of the faceting that's in here, so I don't want to eliminate everything. And then I'm going to use I want to get more familiar with using Rubio, and so I have a can of that, and they basically recommend like 150 is my memory as to what you do for surface prep. So that's what I'm going to probably use. So yeah, I'll get this, then of course the glue up will happen, and then after that I need to level off one of my workbenches and then level up the stool, as it's obviously not rocking because it's on 3 points, but if you stand away from this, it's definitely not like very pretty, in the sense that you feel like it's the same distance everywhere. So I obviously have one leg that is much longer than the others, but no, 3 legs are definitely not the same length at this point, so I need to fix that. All right, signing off for tonight.